Welcome back. All right, so there's been a trade made. I am not wearing a jersey of a team that I think won the trade because I think this is one of those ones that's really open-ended. So I wore Utica because, sure, there was a majority of the time spent for Juolevi's career after being drafted by the Canucks in Utica. Olli Juolevi traded in favor of keeping him around and keeping this narrative going. Coming back from Florida, Lammikko, fourth liner, 44 games, 4 goals, 1 assist last year for Florida. Number 65 pick in 2014. Noah Juulsen also coming back in the deal. Only played 4 games for the Panthers in 2020, 2021. He was a number 26 pick for the Montreal Canadiens back in 2015. So in Lammikko and in Juulsen, the Canucks are getting back 2 projects as well, and they're trading out Olli Juolevi, who's gone from prospect to project. I want to talk about how we got here. Now, part of this is because in 2016, when Juolevi gets drafted, that's when the channel was really sort of, taken off. And that was when things really started getting going, was with that draft and my reaction to it, which was shock. Shock that they took Juolevi, not because I didn't think Juolevi was going to be, a defenseman in the National Hockey League, but I like Matthew Tkachuk. I thought Matthew Tkachuk, as kind of an ornery winger, could be exactly what the Canucks needed. But this was not that long after they drafted Virtanen, right? And there was all these other picks forward-wise. So sure, draft a defenseman. I don't subscribe to that idea at all. I think you always draft best player available. We'll come back to it. So we look at the draft rankings in 2016. In general, he's number 6 on most lists. On Sportsnet, TSN, HockeyProspect.com, and on Sports Illustrated. McKean's list had him at number 5. ESPN had him at number 8. But every single list except McKean's had him, Olli Juolevi, below Tkachuk. Tkachuk was 4th on Sportsnet, TSN, and Sports Illustrated's list. Tkachuk was 5th on Hockey Prospects list, 6th on ESPN's list, and Tkachuk was 6th on McKean's list right after Juolevi. So in terms of where he was picking, Jim Benning was setting a precedent that fans were kind of concerned with. And there was a lot of concern coming out of the draft. Because again, it wasn't that there was dislike for the Juolevi pick. There was the, how can you pass on Matthew Tkachuk in this draft reaction. This was, though, a second round, later on in drafts where they'd get Demko and everything's great. And the drafting record for Benning is kind of spotty. The 2016 draft, I believe Lockwood's the only one left now from that draft. And it's still yet to be seen whether or not there's an NHL player there, if it's just a 4th liner or what we're going to get. But when Benning drafted Juolevi, he felt he liked his all-around game, both offensively and defensively. He felt that the offense was pretty good, the defense was excellent, and that he was going to round out, and he also felt he was going to be a top-pairing defenseman in the NHL. But he also threw out there that he was drafting both by what he felt was best player available and organizational need, stating, to start with, we haven't drafted a defenseman in the first round in 11 years. To me, that's not important. And I only say that because I think drafting best player available is the most important thing. We look at all these misses at the draft, right? Or mistakes at the draft. And we say, why did this guy get drafted over that guy? And a lot of the time it's, well, they didn't need a forward, so they didn't draft him. Well, they were looking for a forward, but they wanted a big forward. So by their organizational, they wanted a center. That guy's a winger, so they didn't want him. And you see guys slide down at the draft. And then later on, we look back and we go, wow, I can't believe that guy slid down to late first round or maybe into the second round because he was smaller, maybe because he was a winger and they wanted a center, or maybe in this case because the Canucks felt, hey, so we've already got, our winger in Virtanen. We don't need Tkachuk. And we're going to draft Juolevi. And of course, now we know that this didn't really work. But this is why I always say when I do the draft stuff that it is, I think the best move for a GM is draft best player available. You just go, okay, who's the most skilled player in the draft that's still available? I'll take him. And you trust your scouts have their information right, and you go from there. But again, Juolevi wasn't that far off the board. It's not like they were taking a guy in Juolevi that they could have gotten at 30 or at in the second round. It's not like they went way off the board. This was a pick that was right around where he was supposed to be taken, but it was the fact that Tkachuk was still there. And so this comparison is being thrown out there a lot today. And I wanted to get into the why, which is Benning felt that they were better off drafting a defenseman, that they were good on forward prospects. They needed to stockpile defensive, prospects. And of course, later on, we see them end up with Quinn Hughes because they still needed those defensive prospects. After Juolevi gets drafted by Vancouver, he goes back to London in the OHL. 58 games that first season in London, 10 goals, 32 assists, 42 points. There's nothing in that first year to tell us that Juolevi's not going to be a very good defenseman. The numbers are pretty good. I know it's after his draft year, and so you have to take that with a grain of salt. These players are now older than everybody else, and they should be, dominating the league. They should be putting up really good numbers. So he plays for TPS Turku. He goes over to Finland in 2017-2018. Plays 37 games, 7 goals, 12 assists, 19 points. And again, at this stage, there's nothing really concerning in his development, but it is the offseason in 2019 where that development becomes a concern. He had back pain during the offseason in 2017-2018. He had back pain in the offseason, and he ended up needing surgery to repair a disc in his back. And so he's still a teenager at this point, and he's already needing surgery for a disc in his back. So 2018-2019, Vancouver goes, okay, bring him over to North America. He ends up going to Utica. Mild disappointment that he doesn't make the Canucks team out of camp, but again, nothing really to be concerned with. Plays 18 games for Utica, 1 goal, 12 assists, 13 points. Why did he play so few games for Utica? Injuries. So he had the surgery to repair the disc in his back, 2018. He ended up with a knee injury in 2018-2019 that required surgery. So now he's gone under the knife twice. He hasn't played in the NHL yet, and he's already gone under the knife twice. And this is why when guys get, a reputation for being injury prone, this is what that actually entails. Injury prone is not the same injury just coming up over and over and over again. That's a nagging chronic injury. Injury prone means a guy might have a twisted ankle one day, broken wrist the next. He might have a disc in his back problem the next week. Now, if you have all those injuries within, say, 10 days of each other, you might be in a Final Destination movie. But 2019-2020, after all of that is done, 45 games for Utica, 2 goals, 23 assists, and 25 points. But he's dealing with hip soreness in 2019-2020. And so he's not feeling 100%. He ends up playing one playoff game for the Canucks during their 2020 run to round 2. But really, this is where we get into the is Olli Juolevi ever going to be a top 4 defenseman conversation. It is injury after injury. So back, knee, hip, right? So the season that we played in the calendar year of 2021, which we refer to as the 2020-2021 season, he played 23 games for the Canucks. 2 goals, 1 assist, 3 points. And I guess the debate to be had is whether the injuries were a problem. There were definitely moments out on the ice where Juolevi looked very defensively solid, but there were more moments where he didn't look ready. And there was one goal where the Flames just went right around him. And when you have a defensive defenseman that teams just blow around like they're not even there, that tells you that there's a real problem in that's not a defensive defenseman at the NHL level. Should be able to put the guy to the outside, keep him to the outside. And so that wasn't happening for Juolevi. This training camp, and then in the preseason when he did play, there were comments, of course, about his conditioning. There was a bag skate, and Juolevi ends up collapsing on the ice. Well, if you look at all the injuries he's had over the years, it's not necessarily that surprising if conditioning has kind of become an issue. Because if he played through hip soreness in 2019-2020, and at this point in his career, 5 years out from his draft, if he doesn't make it, that's probably it. So I'm not saying necessarily that he might be dealing with something as well physically, but he could be. Combined with the amount of pressure that you have playing in the Vancouver market, and there is a lot of it. And so, it was time for him to move on. But it is a fascinating tale And I know it's just going to get written off as, well, he's a bust. I was stupid. What a stupid pick. And I still state that, Tkachuk would have been the pick that I would have liked at that spot. And most people were surprised that Tkachuk didn't get taken by the Canucks, and the Flames could not sprint fast enough up there to take Matthew Tkachuk. But it is, again, to me, it's a lesson in not necessarily worrying about which position on your team you're worried about for right now. It's okay, the guy we're drafting right now probably doesn't play for us this year anyways. Maybe he plays a year down the road, 2 years down the road. We don't know what our organizational needs are going to be at that point. Let's just draft the best player available. So, we'll see how Juolevi does in Florida. I wish him the best. Again, I'm not declaring who I think won this deal because I think it's just 3 players changing teams that needed to change teams. And in Juolevi's case, he'll be as glad, I would think, to put the Vancouver debacle behind him as anybody else. He wasn't going to end up playing this year. They didn't waive him today for obvious reasons because they actually, traded him. But it's an interesting end to a very long tale of a player who started out as a top prospect, who looked decent, and then the injuries added up, and he's just never really been able to get into any kind of rhythm. So in Florida, can he end up being a third-pairing defenseman? It's possible. There's a former Canuck prospect that they've done that with in Gustav Forsling. Forsling was kind of just, out there. It really wasn't working out for him, and he goes to Florida, and it works. So all the best to you, Levy. Looking forward to seeing if Lammikko ends up on the Canucks roster for opening night or where he ends up. And for Noah Juulsen, I've got my fingers crossed that at some point in time he gets to the NHL and gets a chance to stay as well. But again, much like for Juolevi, Juulsen has had injury problems, and it's just been one thing after another. So maybe this works. Let me know your thoughts regarding this deal in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. You just happened upon this video. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.